The night was heavy, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow sound itself. In the occupied outskirts of Kherson, where the Dnipro river's breath hung cold in the air, a faint rustle broke the silence. It wasn't the wind, nor the distant rumble of artillery that had become the city's heartbeat. It was the soft crunch of boots on frost-covered grass, deliberate and measured, as if each step feared waking the war itself. A shadow moved through the ruins of a school, its walls pocked with scars from shelling the playground eerily still under a sliver of moonlight. In the center of this ghostly scene stood Mykola, a Ukrainian SBU Special Forces operative, his breath visible in the freezing air. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the darkness, locking onto a flicker of movement behind a shattered window. A child's silhouette, small, trembling, clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit. Mykola's heart thudded, not from fear of the enemy patrols rumored to be close, but from the weight of what he saw, a pair of wide, terrified eyes staring back, reflecting the faint glow of a distant flare. Those eyes held a question unspoken, but deafening. "Will you save me?" He crouched low, his gloved hand brushing the ground, feeling the cold earth beneath. The mission was clear: extract a group of children hidden in a makeshift shelter, trapped in Russian-occupied territory since the war's brutal escalation in 2022. But in this moment, it wasn't the mission that gripped him. It was the memory of his own daughter Olena, safe in Lviv, her laughter a distant echo in his mind. He tightened his grip on his silenced rifle, not to fire, but to anchor himself against the flood of emotion. The air shifted. A low hum like a swarm of bees cut through the night. Drones, Russian surveillance drones, their red lights blinking like predators' eyes in the sky. Mykola pressed himself against the crumbled wall, his pulse racing. The child's silhouette vanished, ducking back into the shadows. Time was slipping away. If the drones spotted him, or worse, the children, the mission would end before it began. He closed his eyes for a split second, picturing Olena's face, her small hand waving as he left for this war. Stay alive, he told himself. For her. For them. The scene froze, a man in tactical gear. A child in hiding a city, holding its breath under the threat of machines in the sky. How did it come to this? How did Mykola, a school teacher turned soldier, find himself here in the heart of a war-torn city, chasing whispers of hope in the dark? To understand, we must step back to the days before this night, when the plan was set in motion, when courage was forged in the quiet moments before the storm. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke as Mykola and his small team gathered in a safe house on the edge of Ukraine-controlled territory. Maps were spread across a table, illuminated by a single flickering bulb. The room was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into bones, but the men barely noticed. Their focus was singular. Children were trapped in a Russian-held village across the river, taken from their families during the chaotic occupation of Kherson in 2022. Reports had surfaced, whispers from resistance networks, that these children were being moved possibly to camps far from home. The SBU had tasked Mykola's unit with their rescue, a mission deemed near impossible. But Mykola, with his quiet resolve, had volunteered without hesitation. The hook of this moment lingered in the air, the unspoken bond between a soldier and the children he swore to save, the weight of their trust pressing against the danger of the night. It was a story not of war's fury, but of its quiet defiance, of a man stepping into the dark to bring light to those who had none. Backstory and inner world. Mykola stood in the dim glow of the safe house, his silhouette sharp against the flickering bulb. At 34, he carried the weight of a life reshaped by war. Born in a small village near Lviv, he had once been a school teacher, his days filled with chalk dust and the laughter of children learning to read. His hands, now calloused from gripping a rifle, had once turned the pages of poetry books, reciting verses to his students under the shade of linden trees. That world felt like a dream, now distant and fragile, shattered when the war came in 2022. Mykola had joined the SBU not out of a thirst for battle, but because he saw his daughter Olena's face in every child caught in the conflict's grip. She was 7 now, safe with her grandmother in Lviv, her dark curls and bright eyes a constant ache in his heart. Each night he carried a small photo of her tucked inside his vest, a talisman against the darkness. His inner world was a storm of contrasts. Fear gnawed at him, not of death, but of failing those who depended on him. He remembered Olena's small hand in his as he left for the front, her voice asking when he'd come home. The promise he made to return to read her favorite story again kept him moving forward. Yet hope flickered too, a stubborn flame. He believed in the mission, in the chance to bring children back to their families, to restore a piece of what the war had stolen. Mykola's quiet demeanor hid a fierce resolve tempered by the weight of responsibility. He wasn't a hero in his own mind, just a father who couldn't look away. Beside him stood Petro, the team's explosives expert. At 40, Petro was broad-shouldered, his hands scarred from years as a mechanic in Odesa's bustling port. His laugh, once a constant in the workshops where he fixed fishing boats, had grown rare, replaced by a steady calm that steadied the team. Petro had no children, but his younger brother had been drafted early in the war, lost in the chaos of Mariupol. That loss was a wound he carried silently, his humor now a shield against grief. In the safe house, he'd tinker with their equipment, muttering about wires and timers, but his eyes often drifted to the map as if searching for the brother he couldn't save. Petro's hope was simpler than Mykola's, to keep his team alive, to see them laugh again when the mission was done. Sofia the medic was the youngest at 28. A nurse from Kiev, she had joined the SBU after volunteering in field hospitals during the war's first months. Her face, framed by a dark braid, was soft but unyielding, her green eyes sharp with focus. Sofia had grown up in a family of doctors, her parents' stories of healing, shaping her dreams of saving lives. The war had hardened her, but not her heart. She carried a small notebook where she sketched flowers between missions, a quiet rebellion against the destruction around her. Her fear was not for herself, but for those she couldn't save. Every wound she bandaged reminded her of the ones she'd lost. Sofia's strength lay in her empathy, her ability to see the human behind the soldier, the child behind the fear. Andriy the navigator was a lanky man from Chernihiv, his beard streaked with early grey at 36. A former geography teacher, he had a mind for maps and stars, able to guide the team through fog and ruin with uncanny precision. His hometown had been under siege in 2022, and though his family escaped the memory of their fear, fueled his resolve. Andriy's inner world was one of quiet faith, not in a god, but in the land itself, its rivers and hills a testament to endurance. He feared losing his way, not just on the mission, but in the war's moral fog. His hope was to see his children run through fields again, free from the shadow of drones. Taras, the signals expert, was a wiry man from Vinnytsia, his quick wit a spark in the team's tension. At 32, he had been a radio technician his life, once filled with music and late-night broadcasts. Now his earpiece crackled with coded messages, his fingers dancing over equipment to keep the team connected. Taras hid his fear behind jokes, but at night he'd stare at the ceiling, haunted by the thought of his mother alone in their village. His hope was to hear her voice again, to tell her he was safe. Oksana, the reconnaissance specialist, was an enigma at 30. Raised in Donetsk, she had fled the region's unrest years before, her sharp instincts honed by survival. Her eyes, always scanning, missed nothing, and her silence spoke of a past she rarely shared. Oksana's fear was betrayal, not from her team, but from a world that had already taken so much. Her hope was quiet to prove through this mission that trust could still exist. Together, they were a tapestry of ordinary lives woven into an extraordinary moment. In the safe house, as they checked their gear, their silence was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Mykola glanced at his team, seeing not just soldiers but people, parents, siblings, dreamers, each carrying a piece of home into the unknown. The children they sought to save were faceless, yet achingly familiar, their imagined laughter echoing in each soldier's heart. The mission was more than a task. It was a bridge between who they were and who they hoped to be. As Mykola folded Olena's photo back into his vest, he felt the weight of their collective resolve. The war had taken much, but it hadn't taken this, the stubborn human need to protect, to hope to bring light to the dark. The team stood their shadows merging in the dim light, ready to face the river and the night beyond. On the way to battle, the Dnipro River lay before them, a black ribbon under a sky heavy with clouds. Its surface rippled faintly, catching the pale glow of a crescent moon that flickered like a candle about to gutter out. Mykola stood at the water's edge, his breath visible in the October chill, his gloved hands tightening around the straps of his pack. The team, Petro Sofia, Andrei, Taras, and Oksana, stood in a loose semicircle, their silhouettes blending into the darkness. The inflatable boat, small and unassuming, bobbed gently at the shore, its rubber hull creaking against the current. This was their lifeline, their path into the occupied east bank of Kherson, where the children waited. The air was thick with the scent of mud and diesel, a reminder of the war's unrelenting grip on the land. The team moved with practiced silence, each step deliberate, as if the ground itself might betray them. Andrei the navigator knelt by the boat, his eyes scanning the stars through a break in the clouds. His fingers traced an invisible map in the air, plotting their course across the river's swift currents. The Dnipro was treacherous here, its waters cold enough to numb limbs in minutes, its banks lined with reeds that could snag or conceal. Andrei's voice, low and steady, broke the quiet. We cross at the narrow bend, half a kilometer south. The fog's thick there, our best cover. His words were a tether, grounding the team in the face of the unknown. Petro loaded the last of their gear explosives, packed tightly, fuses secured his movements, methodical, almost reverent. He paused, glancing at Mykola, and offered a half-smile, the kind that carried the weight of shared burdens. Cold tonight, he muttered more to fill the silence than to complain. Mykola nodded his thoughts, drifting to Olena, to the warmth of her small hand in his. The memory was a fleeting comfort, quickly swallowed by the task at hand. He checked his silenced rifle, its weight familiar. Not a weapon of destruction, but a tool to protect. Sophia adjusted her medic's pack, her fingers brushing the notebook tucked inside. She'd sketched a sunflower that morning, its petals bold against the page, a quiet act of defiance against the war's greyness. Her eyes met Oksana's, who stood at the edge of the group, her gaze fixed on the opposite bank. Oksana's reconnaissance had mapped the terrain in her mind, every ditch, every ruined house, every likely patrol route. Her silence was her strength, but Sophia saw the tension in her shoulders, the weight of memories from Donetsk that she never spoke of. Taras, fiddling with his radio, caught Sophia's glance and winked his humor a spark in the cold. "Hope the kids like my jokes," he whispered, earning a faint smile from her. The team pushed the boat into the water, the current tugging at it like an impatient hand. Mykola took the lead, stepping in first, his boots sinking into the muddy shallows. The others followed their movements, fluid, a choreography born of trust. The boat rocked as they settled, the river's chill seeping through their gear. Andri took the oars, his strokes silent but firm, guiding them into the fog. The world shrank to the creak of the boat, the lap of water, and the faint hum of drones somewhere high above. Mykola's eyes strained through the mist, searching for the red lights of surveillance, his pulse a steady drum in his chest. The river crossing was a study in tension. The fog, a blessing and a curse, cloaked them but dulled their senses. Every splash felt too loud, every shadow a threat. Mykola's mind flickered between focus and memory. Olena's laughter, the classroom where he'd taught the day he'd traded his books for a uniform. He wondered what the children they sought were like. Did they still dream of home? Did they cling to toys like his daughter did, as anchors against fear? The thought tightened his grip on the boat's edge, grounding him in purpose. Halfway across, a low hum grew louder, closer. A drone, its light cutting through the fog like a knife. The team froze, the boat drifting silently. Taras, his earpiece pressed close, whispered, "It's circling, stay low." Mykola's heart pounded, not for himself, but for the mission. If they were spotted now, the children would be lost. He pressed his body against the boat's floor, his cheek against the cold rubber, willing the drone to pass. Seconds stretched into eternity, the hum fading, then returning, then fading again. Taras gave a nod, clear for now. The team exhaled as one, the river carrying them onward. They reached the eastern bank, the boat scraping against a muddy slope. Oksana was first out, her boots silent as she scanned the reeds. The village lay a kilometer away, its silhouette barely visible through the fog. The school, their target, was a low, crumbling structure on a rise, its playground, a graveyard of twisted swings and shattered slides. The team moved inland, crouching low, their steps muffled by frost. The air was sharp, the ground uneven, littered with debris, shards of glass, a child's shoe, a rusted bicycle wheel. Each fragment told a story of lives, interrupted, of a village that had once been a home. Mykola led the way, his night vision goggles casting the world in shades of green. The team moved in a loose formation, each member a shadow in the dark. Petro's explosives were a last resort, a contingency for barriers they couldn't bypass. Sophia's medical kit was ready for the children who might be injured or weak from hiding. Andri's map was in his head, guiding them through fields and ditches. Taras monitored the radio, his earpiece, a lifeline to the world beyond. Oksana's eyes never stopped moving, catching the glint of a tripwire or the shadow of a patrol before it could catch them. The journey to the village was a dance with danger. They skirted a mined road, its surface pocked with craters. They paused in a ditch as a patrol's headlights swept past, the rumble of an armored vehicle shaking the ground. Mykola's breath caught his mind, racing with what-ifs. What if the children had been moved? What if the basement was a trap? He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the next step, the next breath. The team's silence was their shield, their trust, their weapon. As they neared the village, the fog began to lift, revealing the school's jagged outline. Mykola signaled a halt, his hand raised. The team crouched behind a collapsed wall, their eyes on the rise. A single light flickered in the school's ruins, faint but steady like a heartbeat. Was it a signal from the resistance? A trap. Mykola's fingers brushed Olena's photo in his vest, grounding him. The children were close, he could feel it. The night was still, but the air thrummed with possibility, with the weight of what lay ahead. The team exchanged glances, their faces unreadable in the dark, but their resolve clear. They were ready. The school loomed its shadows, hiding both hope and danger. Mykola took a breath, his heart steady now, and stepped forward, leading them into the unknown. The battle begins, twist and struggle. The school loomed like a ghost in the fog, its broken walls jagged against the Kherson night. Mykola crouched behind a shattered concrete pillar, his breath shallow, his eyes locked on the faint light flickering in the distance. The team fanned out their shapes, dissolving into the shadows of the playground, twisted swings creaking faintly in the wind, a slide half buried in rubble. The air was sharp with frost, carrying the distant hum of a generator, a sound that set Mykola's nerves on edge. It meant presence activity risk. The children were close hidden in a basement beneath the school, but so were the patrols guarding the village. The mission meticulously planned now hung on a knife's edge, every second a test of nerve and precision. Mykola signaled to Oksana, whose eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the perimeter. She pointed to a narrow path leading to the school's rear entrance, partially hidden by overgrown weeds. The team moved like whispers, their boots silent on the frost-covered ground. Tara's earpiece pressed close, monitored the radio for any sign of alarm. Sophia clutched her medic's pack, her face a mask of focus, while Petro's hands hovered near his explosives, ready for barriers they couldn't bypass. Andriy, trailing last, memorized their route, his mind mapping escape paths through the ruins. The night was their ally, but it was fickle, the fog thinning under a rising wind. They reached the school's rear, a crumbling doorway framed by broken bricks. Mykola's night vision goggles painted the scene in eerie green, revealing a hallway littered with debris, scattered books, a child's drawing of a sun pinned to a cracked wall. The sight tightened his chest, a reminder of the lives they were here to save. He gestured for the team to split Oksana and Taras to scout the upper floor, Petro and Sophia to secure the ground level, while he and Andriy searched for the basement entrance. Time was their enemy now. The longer they lingered, the greater the chance of detection. The plan was simple but fragile. Locate the children, confirm their condition, and extract them to the river before dawn. The resistance had marked the basement with a faint chalk symbol, a circle with a slash, visible only to those who knew to look. Mykola's fingers brushed the wall searching, until he found it etched near a rusted stairwell. His pulse quickened. They were close. He nodded to Andriy, who checked his compass, ensuring they could retrace their steps. The stairwell descended into darkness, the air growing colder, heavier, as if the school itself held its breath. But the night turned against them. A sharp crackle broke the silence, Taras's voice in Mykola's earpiece, urgent but controlled. "Patrol north side. 2 vehicles, maybe 6 men. They're circling." Mykola's stomach dropped. The team froze their eyes, meeting in the dim light. The patrol was closer than expected, their headlights slicing through the fog, casting shadows that danced across the ruins. Mykola's mind raced, calculating. If they moved now, they risked exposure. If they waited, the patrol might tighten their net. He signaled to hold position, his hand steady despite the storm in his chest. The team pressed against the walls, blending into the darkness. The hum of engines grew louder, tires crunching on gravel. Mykola's thoughts flickered to Elena, her face a fleeting anchor. He couldn't fail, not her, not the children. Andriy's hand rested on his shoulder, a silent reassurance. The vehicles paused, their lights sweeping the playground. A voice, muffled but sharp, carried through the night, speaking in low tones. Mykola strained to listen, catching fragments, routine chatter, but laced with suspicion. The patrol was checking the school, likely alerted by the generator's hum or a stray report from a drone. The twist came without warning. As Mykola and Andriy crept toward the basement, a faint clatter echoed from above, a loose tile dislodged by Oksana's boot. The sound was small, but in the stillness it was a gunshot. The patrol's voices stopped. A flashlight beam cut through the fog, probing the school's facade. Mykola's heart thudded, his fingers tightening on his rifle. He whispered into his comms, "Oksana, Taras, freeze." Upstairs, Oksana pressed herself against a wall, her breath held, while Taras crouched behind a desk, his radio silent. The beam lingered, then moved on, but the patrol didn't leave. Footsteps crunched closer boots on broken glass. Mykola made a split-second decision. "Andrei with me." "We find the kids now." They descended the stairwell, their steps light but urgent. The basement was a maze of damp corridors lit only by their goggles. The air smelled of mildew and fear. Mykola's hand found a heavy door, the chalk symbol, glowing faintly. He pushed it open, revealing a small room, its walls lined with blankets. 7 children huddled in the corner, their eyes wide faces, pale in the green light. A girl no older than 10 clutched a stuffed rabbit, her gaze locking onto Mykola's. It was the same silhouette he'd seen from the window, the same eyes that had pierced the night. "Shh," Mykola whispered, kneeling. "We're here to take you home." The girl nodded, trembling but trusting. Sophia, who had joined them, moved forward, her voice soft as she checked the children for injuries. They were thin, cold, but unharmed, their silence, a testament to months of hiding. Mykola's relief was fleeting. The patrol was still outside, their voices growing louder. Taras's voice crackled again. "They're entering the school. We need to move." The struggle intensified. Mykola's team was now split with Oksana, and Taras trapped upstairs, unable to rejoin without risking detection. Petro, still on the ground floor, signaled he could create a diversion, a small explosive to draw the patrol away, but it would cost them their stealth. Mykola weighed the options, his mind a battlefield of its own. The children's safety was paramount, but so was the team's. He looked at the girl with the rabbit, her eyes steady now, and made his choice. Petro set it. Small charge far side. Buy us time. Petro moved swiftly, planting a timed explosive in the playground's ruins. The team in the basement gathered the children, wrapping them in blankets, guiding them toward the stairwell. Sophia whispered reassurances, her hands steady despite the chaos. Andrei led the way, his compass a lifeline. The explosion, when it came, was a muffled thud like a distant thunderclap. Outside, the patrol shouted, their footsteps racing toward the sound. Mykola's team seized the moment, moving the children up the stairs, their steps a hurried ballet in the dark. But the night wasn't done with them. As they reached the ground floor, a new sound pierced the fog. A drone, its hum low and predatory, circling closer. Taras, still upstairs with Oksana, hissed through the comms, "It's got thermal." "We're pinned." Mykola's heart sank. The drone could spot their heat signatures, turning their escape into a death trap. The children clung to Sophia, their fear palpable. Mykola looked at Andrei, then at the girl with the rabbit, her small hand gripping his sleeve. The mission hung by a thread, and the night was closing in. The team's unity held them together. Mykola's voice, calm but firm, cut through the tension. "We split again. Oksana, Taras draw the drone north. We take the kids to the river." It was a gamble, but it was all they had. The children's eyes, wide with trust, fueled his resolve. The school's walls seemed to lean in the night, alive with danger, but Mykola moved forward, leading his team and the children toward the river, toward hope. The sacrifice. Decision and turning point. The night pressed in heavy, with the weight of choices yet to be made. Mykola led the children through the school's shadowed corridors, their small forms huddled close, their footsteps muffled by Sophia's gentle guidance. The girl with the stuffed rabbit clung to Mykola's sleeve, her grip a silent plea that anchored him to the moment. Outside, the drone's hum grew louder, a relentless hunter in the sky, its thermal lens sweeping the ruins. Upstairs, Oksana and Taras were still pinned, their comms crackling with urgency. The patrol, distracted by Petro's explosion, was regrouping their voices sharp in the fog. Time was a noose tightening around the team's neck. Mykola's mind raced, mapping the path to the river. The boat waited, hidden in the reeds, but the open field between the school and the Dnipro was a death trap under the drone's gaze. Andriy crouched beside him, checked his compass, his face taut with focus. Sophia whispered to the children, her voice a steady hum of reassurance, while Petro guarded the rear, his explosives ready but useless against the drone. The team was split, their unity strained by the school's walls and the night's dangers. Mykola knew a decision loomed, one that could save the children or doom them all. Taras's voice broke through the comms, low and strained. "Drones locked on our position. We can't move. You've got a window, Mykola, take it." Oksana's voice followed, calm but resolute. "We'll keep it busy. Get the kids out." Mykola's chest tightened. Their plan was unraveling, and the cost was becoming clear. Oksana and Taras were offering to draw the drone's attention, to become its target, giving the others a chance to reach the river. It was a sacrifice unspoken, but undeniable, and it hung in the air like the fog itself. Mykola hesitated, his hand brushing the photo of Olena in his vest. He saw her face, her smile, but also the faces of the children behind him, their eyes wide, trusting, waiting. He looked at Andriy, whose nod was steady, a silent agreement to trust their teammates. Sophia's gaze met his, her expression a mix of fear and resolve, her hand resting on the shoulder of a boy who clutched a torn scarf. Petro's jaw was set, his eyes on the hallway, ready to act. The team's bond, forged in shared purpose, held them together, but Mykola knew this moment would test it to its core. He spoke into the comms, his voice low but firm. "Oksana, Taras, head north. Use the ruins for cover. Draw it away, then double back to the rendezvous. We'll meet you at the boat." A pause. Then Oksana's reply, clipped but steady. "Understood. Go now." The weight of her words settled over Mykola like a stone. He signaled the team to move, guiding the children toward the school's side, exit a narrow door half hidden by collapsed beams. Oksana and Taras acted swiftly. From the upper floor they broke cover, darting through the ruins toward a cluster of shattered houses. Oksana's movements were precise, her reconnaissance instincts guiding her through the dark. Taras followed his radio pack, bouncing a flare tucked in his hand as a last resort. The drone's hum shifted its red light, pivoting north, chasing their heat signatures. The patrol's shouts grew louder, drawn by the movement, their flashlights slicing through the fog. Oksana and Taras were now the bait, their lives a gamble to buy time. Mykola led the children across the open field, their small bodies low to the ground, blending with the frost-covered grass. Sophia and Andriy flanked them, their steps careful but urgent. Petro brought up the rear, his eyes scanning for threats. The field was exposed, the river still 100 meters away, its dark waters a promise of safety. Mykola's heart pounded each step a prayer. The girl with the rabbit stumbled, her small hand tightening on his. He caught her, lifting her gently, her weight, a reminder of why he was here. Almost there, he whispered more to himself than to her. But the night turned cruel. A sharp crack echoed a rifle shot, not from the patrol, but from a sniper hidden in the ruins beyond the field. The bullet struck the ground near Petro, kicking up dirt. The team dropped flat, the children gasping their fear, a palpable weight. Mykola's goggles scanned the darkness, catching the faint glint of a scope. The sniper had been waiting, likely alerted by the drone's sweep. The patrol was closing in from the north, their voices now a chorus of urgency. Oksana and Taras's diversion had bought time, but not enough. Mykola's mind churned the turning point upon them. The sniper pinned them. The drone circled back, and the patrol was minutes away. The river was close, but crossing the field under fire was suicide. He looked at the children, their faces pale, their trust unwavering despite the chaos. Sophia's eyes met his, her hand steadying a boy who trembled. Andri's compass was useless now, his focus on the sniper's position. Petro's voice was a low growl. I can take him out. One charge high arc into those ruins. It was a desperate plan Petro would expose himself to, plant the explosive drawing the sniper's fire. The risk was clear, but so was the alternative stay here, and they'd all be caught. Mykola's decision came in a heartbeat, born of instinct and trust. Do it, he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Petro nodded, his face set, and crawled toward a ditch, his movement slow but deliberate. Mykola turned to Sophia and Andri. When it goes off, we run, straight to the boat. No stopping. Sophia's nod was firm, her hands guiding the children to stay low. Andri adjusted his pack, ready to lead. The girl with the rabbit looked up at Mykola, her eyes a mirror of Olena's, and he felt a surge of resolve. He wouldn't fail them. Petro reached the ditch, his hands working quickly to set the charge, a small explosive timed for impact. He stood exposing himself for a split second and threw it toward the ruins. The sniper fired the shot, grazing Petro's shoulder, a shallow wound that drew a hiss but didn't stop him. The explosive detonated a flash of light and sound that shattered the ruins, silencing the sniper's scope. The patrol's shouts grew frantic, drawn to the blast, giving the team their chance. Mykola shouted now. The team surged forward, the children between them, their small legs pumping across the field. Sophia carried a boy too weak to run, her strength unyielding. Andri led his eyes on the river's glint. Mykola held the girl with the rabbit, her weight light but heavy with meaning. The drone's hum faded its focus, still on Oksana and Taras, who were now silent on the comms. Mykola's heart ached, but he pushed forward the river's edge in sight. They reached the boat, hidden in the reeds, its hull a promise of escape. Mykola set the girl down, her rabbit clutched tight, and helped the others board. Sophia checked the children, her hands quick but gentle. Andri scanned the bank, his compass steady. Petro, blood seeping through his sleeve, waved off Sophia's concern, his grin defiant. The river was calm now, the fog returning like a shield. But Oksana and Taras were still out there, their fate unknown, their sacrifice, the hinge on which the mission turned. Mykola looked back at the school, its silhouette fading in the mist. The children were safe for now, but the cost was heavy. He whispered into the comms Oksana Taras' report. Silence answered a void that cut deeper than any bullet. The team pushed the boat into the water, the current pulling them toward safety. But Mykola's heart stayed on the bank with the teammates who had given everything to make this moment possible. Aftermath. The cost and silence. The Dnipro River carried them away, its current steady but cold, pulling the small boat through the fog like a thread through a needle. Mykola sat at the helm, his hands gripping the oars, his eyes fixed on the dark water ahead. The children huddled in the center, wrapped in blankets, their faces pale but alive with a quiet wonder, as if they could hardly believe the night was real. The girl with the stuffed rabbit sat closest to Mykola, her small hand resting on his knee, her eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. Sophia moved among the children, checking for signs of shock or cold, her voice a soft murmur that anchored them. Andri navigated his compass steady, while Petro, his shoulder bandaged by Sophia's quick hands, kept watch at the stern, his face tight with pain, but resolute. The school's silhouette faded into the fog behind them, swallowed by the night. The explosion's echo, Petro's desperate gamble, lingered in Mykola's ears, a reminder of the chaos they'd left behind. The patrol's shouts had grown distant, the drone's hum silenced by distance or fate. But the silence on the comms where Oksana and Taras should have been was a wound that bled quietly. Mykola's heart churned with questions he couldn't voice. Had they escaped? Were they pinned, captured, or worse, the mission had succeeded? The children were safe, but the cost was a shadow that clung to the team, heavier than the fog. The riverbank on the Ukrainian-controlled side came into view, a low rise of reeds and mud. The team guided the boat ashore, its hull scraping softly against the earth. Mykola helped the children out, their small feet sinking into the frost-covered ground. The girl with the rabbit clung to him, her grip fierce, as if afraid the night might take her back. Sophia gathered the others, her hands gentle but firm, leading them to a waiting resistance contact, a woman in a heavy coat, her face hidden, but her voice warm. She knelt before the children, speaking softly in Ukrainian, promising safety, warmth, a way back to their families. The children's eyes widened, hope flickering where fear had reigned. Mykola stood back, his gaze drifting to the river to the east bank where Oksana and Taras had last been. The silence on the comms was deafening now, a void that filled the air with unspoken loss. He tried once more, his voice low, almost a whisper. Oksana, Taras, report. Nothing. Andrei placed a hand on his shoulder, his eyes heavy with the same weight. They knew the risk, he said, his voice steady but soft. They gave us this. He gestured to the children, now being led to a hidden truck, their small forms disappearing into the dawn's first light. Petro, leaning against a tree, winced as he adjusted his wounded shoulder. Sophia had done her best, but the graze was deep, a reminder of his choice to draw the sniper's fire. He caught Mykola's eye and nodded, his grin faint but defiant. Worth it, he said, his voice rough. Mykola wanted to believe him, but the cost was etched in the lines of Petro's face, in the empty static of the comms, in the fog that seemed to carry the war's grief. The school, the village, the river, they were behind them now, but they left a mark like footprints in the mud. The aftermath was not measured in victories or losses, but in moments, the playground's twisted swings frozen in time, the chalk symbol on the basement door a fragile sign of hope. The girl's rabbit clutched tight as she stepped into the truck, her eyes meeting Mykola's one last time. The silence that followed was not empty, but heavy, filled with the weight of what had been gained and what had been left behind. The war continued its distant rumbles, a reminder that this was but one night, one mission in a tapestry of struggle. Mykola walked to the river's edge, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The fog was lifting, revealing a sky streaked with grey and gold, the dawn breaking over Kherson like a promise kept. He pulled Olena's photo from his vest, its edges worn from countless touches. Her smile was a beacon, a reason to keep going. He thought of the children, now safe, their faces, a mirror of his daughters. He thought of Oksana and Taras, their voices lost to the night. The war had taken much, but it hadn't taken this, the stubborn will. To save, to protect, to carry light through the dark. The team gathered their gear, their movements slow, deliberate. Sophia packed her medical kit, her notebook tucked inside its pages, holding sketches of flowers that defied the war's greyness. Andrei folded his map, his eyes on the horizon, already plotting the next step. Petro, despite his wound, helped load the boat, his humor returning in quiet quips. They were battered, but not broken, their bond forged anew in the crucible of the night. Mykola looked at them, his team, his family, in this moment, and felt a surge of gratitude. They had done what they set out to do, but the silence of Oksana and Taras was a scar they'd carry. As the truck's engine hummed, carrying the children to safety, Mykola stood alone for a moment, the river at his back. The war would go on its tides, pulling at them all, but this night was theirs, a small defiance against the chaos. The dawn light caught the water, turning it to molten silver, and Mykola felt a flicker of peace. The children were free, their eyes no longer shadowed by fear. Oksana and Taras's sacrifice had made it possible, their courage a flame that would burn in the team's memory. He turned to join the others, his steps steady now. The war's weight was still there, but so was the resolve to keep moving, to keep fighting for those who couldn't. The river flowed on, carrying the night's secrets, its surface smooth, but its depths heavy with stories untold. Mykola's hand rested on Olena's photo, a promise to return to tell her of this night, not of its dangers, but of its hope. Message to viewer. The dawn broke over the Dnipro, its light spilling across the river, like a quiet vow. Mykola stood on the Ukrainian-controlled bank, the cold seeping through his boots, his eyes tracing the water's flow back toward the east, where the school and its shadows lingered. The truck carrying the children had vanished into the morning, its engine a fading hum, taking with it 7 small lives now free from the war's grip. The girl with the stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with trust, was safe, her silhouette etched in Mykola's mind like a photograph he'd carry forever. Yet the silence on the comms, where Oksana and Taras's voices should have been, hung heavy, a reminder that freedom came at a cost. The team gathered their gear in the pale light, their movements slow, deliberate, as if the night's weight still clung to them. Sophia sat on a fallen log, her medical kit open her hands, tracing the edges of her notebook. The sunflower she'd sketched that morning seemed brighter now, a defiance against the grey dawn. Andriy folded his map, his compass, tucked away his eyes, distant but steady, already mapping the path home. Petro, his shoulder stiff but bandaged, managed a faint grin, his humor a spark that refused to die. They were a family, forged in the crucible of that night, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. Mykola looked at them, his heart heavy with gratitude and grief, and felt the war's paradox it tore apart, yet it bound them together. He pulled Olena's photo from his vest, its edges soft from countless touches. Her smile was a beacon, a reason to keep going, to return to Lviv and hold her close. But the mission had changed him, as all missions did. The children's faces, their fear, their hope, their trust mirrored Olena's, but they also mirrored every child caught in the war's shadow. Mykola thought of the girl with the rabbit, her small hand in his, her eyes asking questions no child should have to ask. He thought of Oksana and Taras, their voices lost to the fog, their sacrifice, the bridge that carried the children to safety. The war was a thief, stealing moments, people, dreams, but it couldn't steal this, the stubborn will, to protect, to hope, to carry light through the dark. The river flowed on its surface, smooth, but its depths heavy with stories. Mykola imagined the children, now wrapped in warm blankets, perhaps hearing the voices of family, or strangers who would become family. He imagined their laughter returning soft at first, like the first notes of a song. The war would not define them, not if they could find home again. And yet the silence of Oksana and Taras was a wound that wouldn't close. Mykola whispered their names into the dawn, a quiet prayer that they'd found their way, that their courage would not be forgotten. The team began their trek back to the safe house, their steps heavy but purposeful. The fog had lifted, revealing a landscape scarred, but enduring fields pocked with craters, trees stripped bare, a village church standing defiant, despite its shattered steeple. Mykola saw beauty in its resilience, in the way the land held fast, like the people who fought for it. He thought of his classroom in Lviv, the chalkboard filled with poetry, the children who once laughed under his care. The war had taken that life, but it had given him this, a purpose sharper than any blade, a reason to face the night. Sophia's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "They'll remember this," she said, her eyes on the horizon. "The kids, they'll remember the hands that pulled them out." Mykola nodded, his throat tight. He hoped she was right, that the children would carry not the fear of the basement, but the warmth of rescue, the faces of those who risked everything. Petro added his voice, rough but warm. "And we'll remember them." Andriy, ever quiet, simply walked on his compass, a reminder that they'd found their way even in the dark. The safe house came into view, its walls a promise of rest, however brief. Mykola paused at the door, turning back to the river one last time. The dawn was full now, the sky a tapestry of gold and grey, the war's rumble distant but ever present. He thought of the letter he'd write to Olena, not of the mission's dangers, but of its heart. The children saved the team's courage, the hope that endured. He'd tell her of the river, how it carried them home, how it whispered of peace even in the midst of war. He'd tell her to hold fast to her dreams, to believe in the light that follows the dark. This night in Kherson was a single thread in the war's vast weave, but it was theirs. It was a story of ordinary people, teachers, mechanics, nurses made extraordinary by choice, by the will to act when the world seemed to turn away. It was a story of sacrifice, not for glory, but for the simple truth that every life matters, every child's laughter, a defiance against despair. Mykola and his team had walked into the dark, not for victory, but for the chance to bring others into the light. What does it mean to be human in a time of war? To choose courage over fear, to carry hope when all seems lost? These are questions that linger, not just for Mykola, but for all who hear this story. The war in Ukraine, like all wars, is a crucible, revealing the best and worst of us. It asks us to look at the faces caught in its shadow, the soldiers, the children, the families, and to see ourselves. What would we do in their place? What light would we carry? This story, inspired by the bravery of those who risked everything to save children in Kherson, is a call to reflect. It's a reminder that even in war's chaos, humanity endures in the hand that reaches out, the voice that whispers reassurance, the heart that refuses to break. Share your thoughts below. What does courage mean to you? How do we hold on to hope in the darkest moments? Subscribe to Ukraine, Frontline War Stories for more untold tales of human resilience. Stories that remind us why we fight not for war, but for each other.